it's really interesting to see the backlash to me pointing out very self-evident facts about Okami, the legendary PS2 classic that released in 2006, developed by Clover Studios, directed by Hideki Kamiya, produced by Capcom. This game has a reputation for being one of the best games ever made, and is considered an absolute cult classic among certain groups of people. However, I, someone who has played through it several times and understands the game very well, have always been very vocal about how this game is extremely overrated, how it doesn't live up to the hype, and how it pales in comparison to the far superior Zelda IP. Again, anybody who's played both will tell you this. Zelda is better. Twilight Princess manages to hit the mark where Okami fails, with its stellar dungeon design, with its amazing character moments, with its combat system, with its puzzles. It's just incredible actually putting the two together and seeing just how much Twilight Princess stomps Okami into the dirt. It's really not even close. But for some inexplicable reason, the internet has kind of gaslit themselves into thinking Okami is this big deal, this super popular game, and Twilight Princess was some kind of disappointment of a failure, right? When in reality, Twilight Princess was a big deal. It reinvigorated the Zelda IP. It introduced a lot of people to the Wii console. It was a monumental moment in gaming, but it is not thought of as such among gamers. People don't look back on that release fondly, even though the hype was incredible, the final product was amazing. Like the game, when you play Twilight Princess today, you can clearly see that it's leaps and bounds ahead of everything else that came out that year. The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, Okami, like everything else that people tried to prop up against Twilight Princess, it all failed. Twilight Princess and Wii Sports paved the way for the Nintendo Wii to dominate that console generation. And Okami itself actually only became relevant after it was ported to the Wii. When it originally released on the PS2, it was a complete and total bomb. And that's the great irony of Okami and its cult appeal, actually. People always say it's a Zelda killer. Everyone always says it was better than Twilight Princess, that it really is an example of just how great the PS2 was in general. But when you really look at the people who are genuinely enthusiastic about Okami, who remember it and appreciate it for what it is primarily Zelda fans who understand that The Legend of Zelda was better. It's kind of amazing to see this happen. To me, it couldn't be more obvious that the vast majority of the people who prop up Okami against The Legend of Zelda have not played either. And it feels that way in regards to more modern titles, Skyrim, Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring, right? It's the same kind of mindset, right? Where the industry has to lash out against the industry leader at Nintendo in any way it possibly can. Whether it's like bragging about sex scenes with a bear in Baldur's Gate 3, or pretending that Elden Ring is some completely original thing that's never been done before, right? The industry bends over backwards to try and keep it an open secret that Nintendo IPs are leaps and bounds ahead of their competition. To the point where after Tears of the Kingdom came out, there was this very big push to try and gaslight people into thinking the game was a bomb, that it was a rehash, that it didn't live up to the Breath of the Wild, when in reality, more and more people are being introduced to that game all the time. I myself bought it as a gift this year, and I can't be the only one. And again, what's happening with Tears of the Kingdom now is simply a repeat of what happened with Breath of the Wild, where the industry was in denial that Breath of the Wild is one of the best games ever made at first, and now they kind of have to grudgingly admit it's true, not because the game suddenly clicked and they suddenly found an appreciation for it, but because they need to downplay the next Zelda game, right? This is the true origin of the Zelda cycle. This is why this keeps happening over and over and over again. It doesn't really have anything to do with the fans, not really, but this is the method the industry have developed in order to downplay every major Zelda release. Gaslighting as many people as possible into thinking that Zelda used to be a good IP in yesteryear, that A Link to the Past was a great game, but oh man, Ocarina of Time dropped the ball. It's so interesting. Looking back at like what boomers say about Ocarina of Time, you can find people like the Spoony one, who will try and tell you that Ocarina of Time was just a remake of A Link to the Past because of their similar concepts and structure. Never mind like all the innovations that Ocarina of Time brought to the table, the gameplay changes, the new item, the time travel, the plot, like oh no, you collect things so you can collect more things so you can beat the final boss. Like they look at the Zelda formula and they write all of these games off as being the same. And that's what happened with Tears of the Kingdom, where people looked at it and tried to create this narrative that like it was the exact same game as Breath of the Wild, which is obviously not true if you play it. But the people who are saying this kind of thing have no intention of playing Zelda. They don't respect Nintendo. They don't respect the fans. All they care about is trying to gaslight you into thinking that there's some hardcore gaming guru, right? Like, oh, I played Ultima back when it was new. So even though these people will like bang on about how big of a fan of classic CRPGs they are, a lot of them can't even get past the tutorial of Fallout 2. Again, looking at Spoony, like again for a lot of these people, the appeal of gamer culture is being part of what's trendy, is being part of like the AAA experience, of being part of like the big thing right now. Just look at how many people like are nostalgic for classic WoW. A lot of these guys will try and tell you that like, oh, I didn't play anything else when WoW was popular because it was just so good. It was a mind-blowing experience. It was the greatest thing ever, right? Obviously, plenty of great games came out while WoW was relevant, but because these people never played anything else, they never had that experience. They never really realized just how much better other games were. And this is the grim reality when it comes to PlayStation 2 fans, is that a lot of them can't process the fact that the reason so many people look back on the GameCube fondly, and the reason it has so many classic games, and the reason people love it so much is because the GameCube was better than the PS2. Okami could not compete with Wind Waker, which came out 3 years before. It couldn't compete with Majora's Mask. It couldn't compete with Minish Cap. It could not compete with Twilight Princess. And, whenever you talk about like the core mechanics, people sneer at you, right? Like, Okame's nothing like Zelda, because you draw on things with a brush. Oh, you mean like in Phantom Hourglass, where you can draw and like make notes on your map and control the character and, do more things than you can in Okami? Even its central gimmick, the paintbrush, completely mogged by some other Zelda game. That's the Okami experience. This is a game that was overshadowed in every way by a superior IP, but the fanboys don't like to admit it. They bend over backward and try to say anyone who's pointing any of this out and pointing out really obvious things, the obvious similarities between Okami and Zelda, and just how Zelda just mogs it at every turn. Like anybody who says that, like, oh, you're just a fanboy. You went into Okami hoping to hate it. Like, no. Like when I first heard of Okami, when I heard about it, like when I first saw it on like G4 and stuff like that, like, I wanted it to be good. Like I didn't buy Okami on my Nintendo Wii expecting to hate it. Right. And even now, like a part of me doesn't really hate the game because I understand why people are enthusiastic about it. It was a passion project. There are things about it that are interesting and do work, but it can't be denied this is a 7 out of 10 game. This is not a game that measures up to what Nintendo produces. And to me, it would be a travesty if I tried to pretend it was. There are games that live up to Zelda's reputation, but they are very few and far between, and Okame is not one of them. Okay, just like Baldur's Gate 3 is not one of them, just like Elden Ring is not one of them. Right? These games have faded into obscurity for a reason. They are not capable of competing with what Nintendo puts out on a regular basis.